Shin Gojira, Shin Godzilla, Godzilla Resurgence. It's almost here, and everybody's gonna finally get to see it. I already did my spoiler-free review. I'll put the link in the description. So this is gonna be like a spoiler kind of review, but not really a review. I'm gonna go through the media program, show some pictures, look at the news trailer that just came out that's full of new images, and answer some questions, but also just give a little bit more information to the images that have been shown and the videos that have been shown, as well as the stuff that's in the media guide. So enjoy! Spoilers! So there's a media guide, or the movie theater program, whichever one you want to call it. There's a lot of pictures in it, and we're going to go through it and talk about them. Like I said in my spoiler-free review, this movie wasted no time getting started. It starts out, there's a little boat in the middle of the bay. Nobody's on it except for the people investigating it, and they find a little origami paper crane, which actually ends up playing into the later part of the movie. But and then there's an explosion in the water. And then, like I said in my spoiler-free review, there's the red, which reminds me of the LCL from Evangelion. But tons of action right away. You never see Godzilla except for his tail occasionally. I think there's like 2 or 3 times they show the tail, but you never see anything else until he finally makes landfall in what the Bandai toys call the second form. And then that's the one that looks like a tsunami when it's coming through. And I call it Bulldozilla because it literally just bulldozes through everything, throwing the cars up in the air, running through buildings. Eventually it does try and climb over a building and collapses it before turning into the third form, which is what you see when it turns all red and stands up on its hind legs. The toy, which they call Kaiju A, but it's also titled Form 2, pretty accurate except for the stance that it has. Its head should definitely be lower because, like I said, it hardly ever lifts its head up past the ground. It's just back and forth, just throwing cars and everything left and right. And then it finally turns into the third form, but even that toy is not 100% accurate either, but we'll get into that in a moment. It stands up, so I call that one Mini Shin, because it looks like Shin Gojira, but it's way smaller, like half the size, maybe even a little bit smaller than half size. And he just stands there. He doesn't have any powers or anything. He actually morphs into that form pretty quickly. You'll see the Form 2 just sitting there on the ground. All of a sudden his skin starts to bubble, turns kind of red, and he stands up on his hind legs. As you're all probably well aware, there is a lot of parallels between this movie and the Fukushima disaster, from the tsunami at the beginning to the response of the government to how they handled the situation. Some of that I'm going to talk about here in the future, and then some of it I've already talked about. Speaking back about the toys and Kaiju B, or Form 3, again, still fairly accurate. I'm going to do a full review soon, but like I said, it's fairly accurate, but the stance is incorrect again. It should be standing more upright, being a literal Mini Shin, and the head should be pointed down more. But for a 6-inch Bandai, it's still pretty good. When the military finally does bring out the helicopters to confront Mini Shin, they don't actually get the chance to fire on him. And it notices something's about to happen, so it turns around and returns back to the water. But the delay in response and action from the Japanese government and military is prevalent throughout the movie, which also plays into some of the issues that they had with the 3/11 Fukushima disaster. In my spoiler-free review, I talked about how the one part of the movie where the dialogue felt like it was kind of dragging on did have a part where they explained Goji's origins slightly, but more so where he gets his energy. And that's where you see all those canisters of radioactive waste that are sitting there underwater. This movie has a humongous cast. I'm sure you guys are aware of that. And it actually, when you watch the end credits of the movie, there's tons of sponsors too, because Japanese movies do not have the budget that Hollywood movies have. But they definitely were able to get the funding for this movie, because you can see tons of logos from companies that I guess are sponsors for the film. Because also, if you look at the CG for this film, it is top notch compared to what normally comes out of Japan. So then after the red form, third form, returns back to the sea, the next time you see Godzilla is actually the main form that you see the rest of the movie, where it's the humongous, pretty much impenetrable by bullets and tanks and missiles. And that's pretty much what all the trailer scenes come from, is from that first landing with the full-size Gojira, where they use helicopter rounds, explosive rounds, then tanks, and they shoot him in the face and shoot him in the dick. Nothing works, and they drop bombs on him, nothing works. So then eventually they decide to come through with B-52 bombers, drop some bunker busters on him, and I guess they catch him off guard, because that really pisses him off. And then that's when you get to see his breath. There's actually like 3 stages to his breath. Like right there, you can see that's where they injure him, and that just pisses him off. And he lights, his spines light up, his mouth lights up, and he starts shooting out this like black mist, like radioactive mist, and it just envelops everything super fast. And then his breath switches to a flame, and all that ignites, and all you can think about is like, holy crap, he's just like a literal atomic bomb that just went off and annihilating everything around him. And then he like amps it up again, and it turns into the little laser that you see. That's just so devastating. But then after he gets through all that and he takes out the remaining B-52 bombers with his back lasers, he goes dormant. Like all the red goes away and he turns into like a statue. And he stays like that until the government decides how they're gonna try and defeat him, which is using the elephant trucks a lot of the same way they used them in Fukushima to cool down the reactors. They're gonna shoot stuff into Godzilla's mouth from the inside, cool him down, or solidify him. But he stays dormant, and the United States and everybody gives Japan like a 2-week notice of like how long they have until they're gonna nuke the whole place, basically. There's that laptop scene right there. That's actually the view from inside of a laptop screen that I talked about in my spoiler-free review. After he wakes up again, that's the first time that you witness the tail laser, which is the one part in my spoiler-free review I talked about where I'm like, I could do without it. I'm just like, really? But I don't hate it. I'm just like, that just seems like much. But again, it's not necessarily bad. So then the government, once they finally make decisions on what they're gonna try and do, even though the United States and Russia have been like harping on them, wanting to help and come in. I don't want to give away the entire plot because this isn't a summary. I'm just going over some basic details. The government decides they're going to try and trap him underneath some buildings, so they blow up the buildings next to him and they collapse him on him and hit him with some trains and knock him over, which I always thought was funny, that military bombs and missiles and tanks, other than the bunker busters, couldn't really do any damage to him, but then multiple trains will knock him over. But yeah, but this part of the movie right here was so freaking dope, dude. Sick gnar, brah. He wakes up again and so much action. Like I said, I loved the pacing of this film, and it just, edge of my seat all the time, even when I didn't have a clue what they were saying. And then Japan's finally victorious. They succeed in stopping Goji, freezing him, solidifying him, knocking him out, whatever you want to call it. In the very last scene, they zoom in on the end of the tail, and you see the humanoids with the spikes. Reminded me a little bit of Evangelion Angels, but you know, it's all good, man. But, yeah, great film. Awesome film. Good stuff. Recommend it highly. And then here we just have a bunch of production images from behind the scenes. You know, there's Ano and other people, Shinji. Just various behind the scenes photos. There's that origami. This is the list of the cast. That's so long. And I was kind of bummed there was no end credits scene because the entire theater, except for like 3 people, sat through all the credits just to have a black screen happen at the end. I was hoping for an end credit screen, but didn't happen. And then in the back of the media guide, there was all the stuff that you could get at the theater listed, except they did not have the Godzilla vs. Evangelion kimono, where I would probably own that right now. I did walk out of there with a towel, t-shirt, this program, and the Red Theater exclusive figure. And here we have all the covers for the new DVDs that have just been released. And then there's the bank. That's actually a little game. Here's all the stuff that's available on Hulu now. The upcoming crossover figures from X Plus, Kiryu. There's the SH Monster Arts. The Sega Game Prize, the Gashapon HG high grade figure. GeForce Tech, food, all kinds of advertisements in the back of this thing. Freaking sweet ass watch. And then the lottery. So stoked to have that Bam Presto figure. And that's pretty much it.